Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Wall Street, starring Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen, Daryl Hannah, and Martin Sheen, and directed by Oliver Stone. Now, why am I doing this series as a head scratcher to you guys? Well, I got two reasons. One is I wanted to surprise you with the new retrospective plus a bonus one after Wall Street 2, which I won't tell you until the end of that show. And the second reason is that this is the 30th anniversary of the original Wall Street coming out in the movie theaters back in 1987. Now, this will be my first viewing of this. I have seen Wall Street in this mystery movie that I've seen before, but I won't tell you until after Wall Street 2. So, what did I think of this movie? Let's get into it. I love the opening sequence being introduced to New York City as a character, and Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon is playing as we first get introduced to Bud Fox, played by, unfortunately, Charlie Sheen. Well, not unfortunately back then, but unfortunately now, 30 years later. Going to work at Wall Street was a great way to open the movie, I feel like. I did find it a little confusing that the movie takes place in the year 1985, when this movie is released in 1987. Why not take place in 1987, aka the current day of when this movie came out? I was really confused. Martin Sheen is Bud's father, aka Carl, who owns a company where he fixes jets. And I like how encouraging he is to his own son that he could have been a doctor or someone else than working at Wall Street. Michael Douglas's iconic role as Gordon Gekko, as he's introduced to Bud and the audience, gives a very powerful performance as a man who believes, and I'm going to repeat this quote later, greed is good, which I personally do not believe, which is a totally great performance by Mr. Douglas, and I will see him again when I get to the Avengers universe with Ant-Man. Gekko hires Bud on his side and spies on Sir Larry Wildman, played by General Zod himself, Terrence Stamp. When he goes on his plane and other things is a very well done moment of the film when Bud follows him around. We hear two magic words of Wall Street, and I'm going to read this just so that I can be aware of what it's called. Anacott Steel. And Bud joins Gekko's party as well as his wife Kate, played by Sean Young, and Darian Taylor, played by Daryl Hannah, which both actresses I'm seeing next week with Blade Runner. But when I get to the party scene, it's a good introduction scene for the ladies, I feel like, too. That line, "Money never sleeps," he says to Bud, aka Gekko, is not only the title of next week's movie, but is a true statement to the entire Wall Street business, which follows us up pretty well. Gordon has a son named Rudy, and doesn't he have a daughter as well in next week's movie, which will become a problem next week? We'll discuss it then. Bud gets promoted to an office, and it all goes good until the end of the movie, which I'll get in there when I get there. And Bud gets a new place in the city, which is a very nice place with good set decoration. That scene where Charlie Sheen asks himself, "Who am I?" was ridiculously bad acted scene by Mr. Sheen. Sorry, Charlie, but you don't have that sell that scene to me very well. That line that Gordon says, "Greed is good," is a very famous line from a movie that was with speeches and will be remembered forever. Bud and his father, Carl, get into an argument about a meeting between Gordon, them, meaning other Wall Street people, and other people, and his son, including his girlfriend Darian, about saving their companies, and Carl doesn't sign it, and that scene was very sad because I thought they were going to lose contact with each other, but Carl does make two appearances, one in the hospital and one at the end of the movie. Bud gets screwed by Gekko, and that's what you get for working for Gordon Gekko in the first place, and Wall Street in general, which I might confess I've never been through it, but it's not an easy job, I will admit that right now. Bud and Darian break up, and Carl had a heart attack, and Bud visits him at the hospital, which was very sad. And Bud visits Sir Harry to destroy Gekko for good, which will happen when Bud gets arrested for securities fraud, and Gekko beats the shit out of Bud to narc Gekko out of the Wall Street business for good. Yeah, I felt like that was a good ending. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give the movie a 8.3 out of 10. This is a great movie, and I don't know how this ended up having a sequel by the end of the day, but this is probably the best Oliver Stone movie I've seen in all my life. I've seen his other works, but he's not great in his recent years. We'll talk about that next week. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for Wall Street, and we'll be back next week, or I'll be back next week for Wall Street 2, Money Never Sleeps, and until next time, greed is good.